Hey everybody, it's Professor Diffley again, History 110, Unit 5, Part 3. We were leaving off with the Second Continental Congress. Last video, we ended with the Declaration of Independence. And so now they've raised an army. The Brits have declared the American colonies to be in a state of rebellion. And the revolution is more or less underway. Very important, nearly 200,000 will serve in the Continental Army, which is the a name of George Washington's army and other state militias over the revolution, really bringing in a significant amount of people into the revolutionary process here. So now let's jump into the war. Yeah, we've seen this. So now we're at the beginning of this. So the Battle of Concord and Lexington. And here's another engraving of it. I see the regulars and the Liberty Tree in the middle. This is a powder horn used in the early Revolution. So let's start with Lexington and Concord. These are known as the beginning of the Revolution, the War of Independence. British forces are marching to Concord to seize arms that the colonists had been stockpiling. They were met in Lexington by militiamen who tried to resist their advance. In Concord, well, first in Lexington, this first skirmish, it's the shot heard round the world, they say now today. No one knows who fired the first shot, but nonetheless, it starts off this. The British were routed. They're beaten here. They retreat to Boston. Large scores, a good number of British and militiamen, colonists are wounded on all sides, but it really does initiate the American War of Independence. It inspired colonists in New England and elsewhere to take up arms. We celebrate these today in Massachusetts, how they known as Patriots' Day, the beginning of this war. And again, it becomes known as the shot heard round the world. It's a poem by Ralph Waldo Emerson, written much later in 1837, and it's called the Concord Hymn. But the wording goes, by the rude bridge that arched the flood, their flag to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmer stood and fired the shot heard round the world. Why is it shot heard round the world? Again, it's the beginning of these colonial uprisings, right, where they're starting to push back against the powerful colonial masters. Other major famous battles here. And again, really look at the video on the Revolutionary War, the War of American Independence. I'm going to hit on some of the keynotes here, but you can see a lot more of it there. This is the Bunker Hill Monument. This is it's a trivia thing. It's one of the few U.S. monuments that actually commemorate a defeat. Most monuments commemorate victories. This one was actually a defeat, but it is an important battle nonetheless. Another trivia, it's not actually fought in Bunker Hill. It's fought on Breed's Hill, which is right near Bunker Hill, but not actually on Bunker Hill. A brutal, brutal battle. 500 dead in the British, 400 Americans dead or wounded. This battle's eventually going to dissolve into hand-to-hand fighting. One more Royal British Marine described the battle as nothing could be more shocking than the carnage that followed the storming of this work. The battle works, right? Their defensive lines. We tumbled over the dead to get at the living, with soldiers stabbing some and smashing out the brains of others. Again, in very, very hand-to-hand brutal combat. Why is this significant, even though the American colonists are forced to retreat? It demonstrated the Americans were willing to fight, and their bravery in the face of the deadly assault by the Redcoats, which is the British were often known as. Again, the British at this point are arguably the most powerful military force on the planet. And here are these seemingly lowly colonists fighting against them and standing up and willing to take huge casualties, but also inflicting significant casualties on the other side. They even fought to the bitter, bitter end. Again, when they ran out of ammunition, they just flipped their muskets over and used them as bats to try to fight this off. Other important things here. This is an image you see on the left of the Knox expedition. This is later General Knox and his men. They took Fort Ticonderoga, which is in the Hudson Valley, upper Hudson Valley of New York. They took the fort, and what they did was they then transported all the way from upstate New York to Boston the cannons from the British, and this is going to really help them lay siege to the city of Boston. Remember, that's where the Brits had fallen back to. And the British are kind of trapped in the city. The Americans took up positions around the city on the high points. Now with these cannons, the guns, that's what they're calling, the guns of Fort Ticonderoga, and are able to really start to drive the British out. Again, this is a major event. They took these over 200 miles in the dead of winter using only ox sleds. This is a really impressive movement. Finally, March 17th, the British abandon the city. They are being forced out. They agree not to burn down the city or destroy it. It's a negotiated exit. But they do chop down the the Boston Liberty Tree there. Today, this is Evacuation Day in Boston, as you've heard it before. But that's why it's on the 17th there. But this is, again, a turning point now. They're beating the British. They're standing up against them, at least beating them in some battles here and forcing their surrender or retreat here. Another important event here is the publishing of Thomas Paine's Common Sense, a widely read document, that pamphlet that really does energize many people towards independence all over. Paine was a recent English immigrant. He published this in January 1776, criticizing the British Constitution and their system. Again, you see this comes even before the actual declaration there. Argued for a democratic system, frequent elections with an actual written constitution, some the Brits still don't have. He's again saying that America is an asylum for mankind. These aren't original ideas, but he addresses them to all Americans rather than just the educated elite. So he's taking these ideas that those who had followed the Enlightenment already know. Now he's publicizing them for the common man. And he does this in very clear, direct, plain language, which in this era especially, and you see this in some academic writing today, it uses big words seemingly for no reason. He wants this widely read, not just by scholars and the elite. Again, why is this significant? Sparks more calls for independence, spread the independence debate to the masses, and 6 months later, they are the colonists are going to declare their independence of Great Britain, of the English. Again, Paine makes no money off of this. The money is donated to the army there. As a result, here's a depiction of from the 1776 publishing, A Common Sense addressed to the inhabitants of America. What it really argues in other ways is it's silly, seemingly, right? It makes no sense for a tiny island like Britain to be ruling over a continent like the colonists have here, and that they should be the ones have their own freedom and democracy, get rid of the hereditary monarchy and that sort of thing. So, to support independence or not everybody was for this. Many colonists were reluctant to embrace independence from Great Britain. They considered themselves English, British, and they didn't see this. Again, this starts out as a tax dispute. They want to be treated equally. They don't necessarily want to break from the British. Again, they're proud of their culture and heritage here. More than a few worried that this rebellion might cause internal social conflict between the elites and the disenfranchised. In many ways, the leaders of the, and this is true at the Continental Congress and all those, these are not the common people. These are the most educated, richest men in America. Many of them tight connections to the British monarchy, the British government, things like that. And they are truly worried about a social conflict, an uprising from below. In many ways, this is directed from above. So views on independence, Massachusetts and Virginia leaders really did want to support independence. They were powerful. They believed they could retain authority. Southern colonies, again, they're upset by the British, especially when Lord Dunmore offers to free slaves and enlist them in the Royal Army to the British. To the colonists in the South. This is worrisome, right? Their whole economy is based on slavery, that sort of thing. New York and Pennsylvania, a little bit more difficult. It seems like evenly split. Small farmers and urban artisans, the lower classes in this sense, lower social economic classes, wanted freedom, so that scared a lot of the upper class. Others argued for compromise and that the war would unleash fighting among the colonies, between each other, between the classes, that sort of thing. So, again, it is not, in many ways, and we're going to see this especially in the next chapter, next unit, is in many ways, there's also a civil war within the colonies. Again, it's somewhat evenly split on who wants independence and not. So back to the Declaration. It asserts the right of revolution, right? When in the course of human events, the government it no longer protects our rights, we have the right to overthrow it, is what Jefferson argues as the primary author. It really does forever alter the meaning of freedom in the U.S. It's no longer just about political rights and the rights of Englishmen. It's the rights of all mankind. That are natural laws, not the Constitution of Britain, not the just the rights of free Englishmen. Natural law justifies America's separation from Britain. It made freedom a universal entitlement for all people. Now, obviously, you're saying, but they had slaves. Of course they did. If you look at this in long view, like many do, this is the beginning of the revolution, which some would argue we're still, trying to see all the way through. It's going to be a long time before most people, or many people, get a lot of their freedoms. But this is, again, and it's written in the sense where it is made universal. It's not just carved out for a small group of people, even though in practice that's how it was at first. This opens the gates for political freedoms and economic and social freedoms to grow over the next centuries. This John Locke, major impact on the Declaration. Again, his social contract theory, where the people make a contract with the government. They give up some of their rights. As long as the government protects those rights, people will follow the government. Once the government stops protecting those rights, the people have the right to rebel. You also get the Lockean triad here, right? Government set up, limited government set up to protect life, liberty, and property. Jefferson substituted the pursuit of happiness for property. Why? Sounds better. It's a little bit more open-ended, but it really does create this open-ended democratic process, which people get to realize their own potential and their own life goals. Again, it's going to take a long time for it to apply to everybody, but this is the starting point. And here you can see their drafts of the Declaration here. And again, this really does create this asylum for mankind. America is a symbol of liberty. It becomes this American exceptionalism. America is different because it's going to allow these things. It's exceptional because it is asserting these natural universal rights unlike anybody else who had before. Very important about the Declaration. Almost every country now has some sort of declaration, especially in the Western world, in our hemisphere, and they all build upon the Declaration of Independence from the Americans. And this really becomes part of America's nationalism, the concept that this is what makes America different and exceptional, is this putting freedom first above all else. And that's what I'm saying. Again, it's becomes a global declaration. It's banned in the Spanish territories where you had powerful monarchies who are afraid of this. In Europe, it's eventually going to have a major impact on the French Revolution. They're even going to use a lot of the terms from America, like the Committees of Public Safety. They're going to have their declarations of rights of man and citizen. And again, you could see this impact all over the world today. Some more propaganda, political materials from the era there. So the battles here, the balance of power between the two, and this will be in many ways a short answer question, is this seems a very lopsided thing. The British, greatest military power in the world, well-trained, professional, disciplined army. They're battle-hardened. They are a highly trained, highly, exceptional equipment, that sort of thing. It also hires its mercenaries. Some of the most feared, the German Hessian troops. So they not only have the best trained army, but they also can buy the other best trained armies there as well. Most powerful navy in the planet by far. Experienced military commanders. They seem to have all of the advantages. The Americans, local militias, undisciplined, lack formal training. These are not professional soldiers. These are common people taking up arms. Very poorly equipped. No navy. It had privateers, which are essentially pirates, that are allowed to attack British naval and commercial ships. But the British definitely have the naval advantage there. Americans did have military experience. They had fought in the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War. So many of them had served, but they don't have the full-on officer corps that the Brits have. But very important, what the American advantage is, where they're fighting on their own soil for a cause that they believed in. And that's very important, is if you're willing to, if you believe in what you're fighting for, you're willing to sacrifice more and more and withstand some of the harshest conditions. And that is really what is different. Fighting on your own soil also means you have the advantage. You know the land, you know places to hide, that sort of thing. And it is also it really does give them a major advantage. All right, we will finish this up in the next video.